Yeah. So after 90, Ralph leaves Vanguard
Hmm.
and Scott takes over. I were there a lot of guys that were like loyal to Ralph? I mean, what was the vibe of that transition like?
Well, I would say we weren't easy on Scott and Lee. Lee was well, he was writing that year, and I don't remember how much Scott may have contributed or who did what, but and Lee came from the Vanguard, but he had also been away for a while, and yeah, I remember. Yeah, I was definitely one of the thorns, and or I felt that way, anyways. I was bitter that Ralph wasn't there anymore, and neither was Glenn, and those were kind of like my guys.
Yeah, for sure. Like Ralph and Glenn. I always was it Crockett and Tubbs from Miami Vice. Those guys. Yeah, but you always were to see them together,
I,
and they do such a fantastic job wherever they're at.
I believe there's some pictures of Glenn with some of Don Johnson's, 80s apparel somewhere. But yeah, they were just, those guys were such a great team. The best team in DCI, if you ask me. And to see them go was really bad. And so, for a kid at the age of, I guess I would have been, 20 back in 91 or so. Um, I didn't, I had not taught, I had not marched other corps, I had not seen the world, I had not done a lot of things. And so, I was a little bit closed off to different ways of doing things. And so, and that continued into 92 for sure. Yeah, it was, having been on the other side of it and having been, experienced some of that myself in different ways over the years with different gigs and stuff, like I understand. And I think especially with Scott, he has an amazing ability to find a way to enjoy himself, to have fun, no matter what. And even though it was a hard year, like, Scott never lost his cool that I can remember. He rolls with the punches better than anybody. And I didn't understand it as well during that year or the next 2 years, but I've come to appreciate it since then for sure. Um, so yeah, I guess that's the answer is like, yeah, there was some bitterness, and I was probably leading the bitterness charge. Although I don't remember how much it was a visible, like, I don't know how much of a dick I was, but I remember just being, you know, uh, sort of bitter about the whole thing, about the whole transfer of leadership.
Yeah, and speaking of the transition and the switch in instructors, uh, we had reached out to a few different people to ask some questions. People you'd marched with or people that you've instructed in the past. Kevin Erickson, I mentioned him earlier. He actually gave me a few questions to ask, but now's a good time for the first one, and it is during your time as a performer with Vanguard from '88 through '92. You marched 3 years with Ralph and Glen leading the percussion program, and two with Scott. Could you describe the differences in approach with regard to general philosophy, playing technique, rehearsal technique, etc., between the two different regimes that you'd marched under?
Yeah, I mean, I could certainly describe it from my vantage point. And again, this is prefaced with the idea that I probably wasn't going to be happy no matter who was coming in, just because that's how attached I was to the way things had been done before. So yeah, I mean, musically, I don't think the years after that were, um, I didn't like it musically. From
You're
a from
you're
a
talking 91 or 92.
Yeah, just from a drumming perspective. I mean, even with all of the notes that we played, and I mean, I'm not saying that it wasn't fun to have like a chunkier book with more notes and things like that, and some of the things we were able to do, but just from a holistically satisfying experience as a musician, yeah, it was, I sorely missed those earlier days. And, approach wise, sure, there's along with, the emphasis on musicality comes, um, there was a lot of, like a lot of what Glenn did for the group was very not on the surface stuff. Like Glenn was basically, he was kind of like the enforcer, right? Like he believed 100% or more in Ralph and Ralph's music and loved it. And it was his, he just really championed that style. And so that was our focus. We went for touch above a lot of other things at times. Light touch, was a big thing in some of those years. Um, and to a certain extent, like, good timing, good tempo control. Whereas in some of the later years, it was a little more, the emphasis was maybe a little more on cleanliness than something like, for instance, rhythmic accuracy. And for me, that kind of drove a lot of the way the slot I found myself in years later is because when I would listen back to some of those years, I'd be like, where can we get a metronome or something like time is a magazine for us, it's like, it's timing of convenience. It's convenient to play the thing a little slow here because it's easier to play clean. And, with hindsight of having just turned 50 and looking back on it, that a part of what makes drum corps different from one another is their interpretation of rhythms and the freedom to do just those sorts of things. So I definitely appreciate that more now than I did in my younger years. But, that kind of, that always rode me a little bit raw, and I didn't know it at the time. So like, videos of 90, of 91, 92, you can hear, the classic snare drum tap off to the shopping spree or flam exercise where it's like, you get done with the exercise, it's like, yeah. And somehow like we all knew exactly how to come in clean, even though we're getting like different tap offs. We knew how to come in at the same tempo and at the exact same time.
Yep.
So yeah, for sure, lots of different like philosophically and musical differences between some of the early years and some of the later years. And as I said, it's like I didn't have much room and much tolerance as a 21-year-old in 92, for instance, who thought he knew everything about everything. Everything was colored with, lime green, unhappy, lenses whereas, I can look back on it now and look at some of the stuff that we were doing and be like, wow, that's just, it's pretty good. Like we're pretty good. But at the time, yeah, I was definitely one of those, probably should have aged out last year type of guys, by 92, especially.
So 91 was your fourth year in the Corps. Even though all of that stuff was going on, did they just leave you alone with the tenors? And it was basically like we're going to do your thing, or was there a lot of oversight with that staff in terms of how you guys were going to work on stuff and execute and all of that?
Because 91 was pretty much all vets, right? Except for Mike.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Yeah, exactly. Tyrus and Lavelle had left and Mike came in. So we went from 5 to 3, to 4. And yeah, we, Mike slid right in. I wish Mike had been there in 90 in hindsight, but, kind of, I have to blame myself in part because I was kind of ruthless to the guy in 89. So I don't blame him for taking a year off and seeing if this was even something he wanted to do. But, he slid in real well. And so he was just, we were a pretty tight crew as a tenor line in 91. Lee was doing a lot of the writing. Lee was more of an oversight kind of guy, I think, with parts. I mean, I think there was probably times where he and Scott would encourage us to do something, or, if they needed some ideas, they'd reach out or whatever. 92, they definitely gave me a lot of leeway with that stuff, to the extent that, I remember a lot of the parts were just like snare drum parts and just arrows, and it just said C. Murray for for the arounds. So, I think they just went, oh, the tenors are the least of our worries. Those guys are fine. They had to put their resources where they were most needed, I suppose. And so, I think, they gave me a lot of freedom to write different things, or at least put the parts around and do that kind of thing.
Was that positive for you? Did you want, obviously there was a part of you that wanted that, because you had a strong sense of feeling how things should be, but also, but then, there's nothing sort of above you to strive for, learn from. I don't know if I'm articulating that correctly, but being a player coach, sometimes you're capable of it, but you would love to have a lot of growth yourself.
Yeah, it's like, is that really what I'm there for? I don't know. I probably could have used to have been challenged, because I was at that age. That was my 5th year, and kind of bitter about a bunch of different stuff, and just sort of just a big pile of unhappy in a lot of ways. And something like that could have helped, but I don't think it was going to come at that time from the situation. Scott had a lot of pressure on his hands, and Kevin did as well. And those guys, they did their best in a tough situation. Like I've said, I've come to appreciate it just from having been on the other side of that now. And it's really tough. And it's, especially when you have a line of really good players, and, they're giving you the raised eyebrow, that's tough. And I want to, just publicly state this, my hat is off to both of those guys for just dealing with that as well as they did, because I don't think that I would have been able to deal with that well at all. I think I would have run for the hills or something if I was being put to some of those kinds of challenges. But it was a mix of really great and terrible things, all in the same bag. And one day it would smell nasty, and the other day it would smell great. And we just kind of had a little bit of everything. It was fun. At the end of the year, back in the days when, you do I&E, and then you'd line up all the I&E, people who won their first, second, third place along the field. Right. And that year in particular, it was just so much red on the field, because there were so many. It was another one of those years where people came out of the woodworks because Vanguard was going to win in 92. That was just the word on the street.
Right.
And it obviously backfired hugely, but you did have a lot of really good players and dancers and, and horn players and everything. So it was fun to be really good and to be admired, in the parking lot and stuff like that. But meanwhile, we were getting pummeled competitively. And, I remember we got beat by, the Crossmen took us at one point. And I don't remember what show that was, but I think it was Matt Altmaier. We were in we'd snuck off to a fast food place, before the buses left. And the Crossmen, we didn't have any Vanguard stuff on. We were sort of incognito, and we were just eating, kind of drowning in our woes. And some of the Crossmen kids were in the same restaurant, just giddy, so happy that they had just beaten us, and of course, I was kind of happy for them, even though I was sorry for myself at the time. But yeah, it was a trip. It was a lot of highs and lows juxtaposed against one another.
Yeah, you have 91, which was the Miss Saigon show, That seemed real fresh. I mean, you guys did a lot of cool stuff. The Excel, decel there at the end, the
Yeah,
helicopter sound effects.
that was cool.
And then, like you said, the word on the street in '92 was you get all these. I call them the assassins. They all go up to Vanguard, and you have and all that quad line, and you add Colin McNutt.
Yeah, you add Colin to that.
Yeah, yeah. So you have not four, but you have like five killer quad players, and like to me, I don't know. I always seen the '92 line right up there with the '91 line because of the amount of talent. And somebody even said like in '92, if you guys wanted to, you guys could play clean whenever you wanted to, but there was just like maybe a vibe of because of the show design that just kind of brought everything down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the vibe was awful. The vibe was. I will say that, I mean, I'm ashamed to admit this, but what am I going to do now? I'm well past the age, and it doesn't really matter. But it's like I remember, us just ticking on purpose so we wouldn't have to go waste time on the field spinning our wheels and getting nothing done. Like I can remember, yeah, rehearsing and just capitalizing on, maybe somebody's on the tech side wanting to, chase down ticks. Well, it's like, well, let's give them some ticks to chase down. So, like, so we can stay standing still and not, I mean, the worst, the worst kind of behavior, right, in this activity. Like you're supposed to, work hard for, the sake of being great and all of this stuff. And these were my values, but that's how bitter a lot of us were. We were just, we elected to be cogs or, like a wrench in the works, right? Like on purpose, just for whatever reason that day. And it was, it really just bad, bad behavior, but yeah.
So in terms of like, searching for something to feel good about that season, you guys had a pretty, fantastic tenor ensemble that you guys performed for I&E that still, I think Rob would agree, stands up to this day. What was the impetus for wanting to put together something like that? And tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, I don't remember when the idea struck, but I think, and I'm not sure if it was my idea or if it was a group idea or what. It was definitely a group composition. It was everybody contributed stuff. And, we had this grab bag of stuff that we could do. And we were, I think, looking for something else to focus on for reasons like what I just described. And Scott, we had Scott's blessing, as far as I can remember. Like he was totally into it and thought we would, do a good job and be a good, representative of the group and so forth. And yeah, it just was a wild hair. And we just, we spent a few sessions after hours and got the permission to go, maybe after hours and work up some stuff in a classroom or something at whatever school we were staying in. And we just put together these ideas. And I think I was kind of the one assembling the ideas and like, okay, well, we'll start with this and we'll sort of go into this. And, I think it was my idea to do the Adagio for strings intro for tenor rim shot. And, I don't remember if it was whose idea it was for Mike to conduct, but that's definitely my favorite part of the whole thing. Yeah, but it came together and we had sort of a carefree attitude. I mean, we were going to compete in the percussion ensemble category because there just wasn't obviously like a category for, battery ensemble or, battery subsection ensembles. So, we had no expectations. It was just a for fun thing. And we, went out there and did the performance. And if I'm not mistaken, we got 5th place. And if that's right, I just want to make a public apology to the groups that were underneath us because you probably shouldn't have been. But it was just fun. I mean, it was a lot of that year was, we weren't we knew that we were kind of a rock show in California. We'd go out to warm ups, and there'd just be these huge crowds, and that, that was really cool, and we all felt like rock stars. But outside of California, and then I think across the rest of the tour and that ensemble and stuff, like, I don't think we we didn't have an understanding of that would make any kind of impact. It was kind of like, we're short circuiting and we need things to do, like to focus on. And so that, for us, that was one of the things that we did. And so, yeah, the fact that it became a sort of lore, and, those videotapes passed down with all the noise lines in the tape and everything. It's cool. I mean, it's something I'm really proud of, but it was just very unlikely, product of those times.
Yeah, you talk about the old recordings. Within this last year, a guy named Matt Hoyt from Bakersfield gave me a whole box full of old VHS tapes, and on there was a tenor sectional from '92 down here in Southern California, and it was great to see that come back and resurface to life. I've since put it on YouTube, but a lot of that stuff had been. You would hear audio cassettes, but you never see videos, and it's cool to see videos of you guys still jamming. Like, my favorite quad exercise that, I don't know if you wrote it or whoever wrote it, is when you're playing on the Spock drum, the da-da-da, 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 and then something completely different with the left hand that just goes around. Yeah. Is there a name for that exercise, or is it just?
I think we called it tenor beat, for lack of something else. I had written that. I think we started playing that in '90, to be honest. And when I joined in '88, the section leader was a guy named Ed Bargarina. I don't know if you guys know Ed or not, but
Ed and Glen taught me at VK in '91, and Jeff Queen. Jeff Queen marched that line too.
Right, small world. Yeah, very talented guy. Ed was he did an I&E that year, and he went out there and improvised. He tuned up a set of quads traditionally, and then he had another set tuned all low. And he improvised on the first set, and then he went and improvised on the second set, and that was his solo. And I just, I didn't know you could do that, like either legally or just creatively. Like, what do you mean improvise? Like, what? And so he had shown me the bit about how you can do independence. You can play patterns on a hand and then play things against that pattern on the other hand. So it was the genius of that idea that he showed me that, I just decided I was playing around one day probably, and was just like, I'm going to, come up with some rhythms that seem to go against that and just make a little timbale-ish pattern. And while doing that, I discovered, hey, what's cool? Like, you can actually you can play single 5 strokes, right? And you can put them in there, and because the hands are split up between the Spock and, another drum, it creates a really weird but cool rhythm. So that thing at the end where it's just basically like diggity-da-da, you're doing single stroke 5s, but one hand's over here. And yeah, it was just a thing to do for the heck of it. And we had been doing that particular beat. It was kind of our for fun thing for a while at that point. And I think we might have started doing that in '90, but maybe it was '91.
Is that written out? Is that available on TapSpace?
Yeah, it is. Back in 2011, we released we had a book of snare solos, like famous DCI snare solos, called Violent Ice Cream. And we released a follow-up book many years later in 2011, I want to say, called Violent Tenor Cream. And it was a lot of solos from a lot of different folks throughout the activity, but we included 2 of the ensembles, and that was one of them. So it is, and that is available in standalone on the website. You can actually buy the 1992, a transcription of the '92 ensemble. So it is written there.
Awesome. Yeah. Back to the questions that Kevin had given me. I think that now's a good time to ask a couple more. He actually gave me quite a bit. But he wanted to know, out of the years you marched, was there a specific year that was particularly meaningful to you on a personal level?
Yeah, kind of neck and neck are 88 and 1990. 88 just because I, I was a first year member who didn't say hardly anything. I just shut my mouth. I was dealing with a lot of knee issues during the season because my body, I didn't have the preseason, which was a blessing and a curse. The curse part was that my body was not ready. I was 17 years old, kind of probably not even fully formed. Um, so I definitely had my share of pain that year, but the blessing was that I never went through auditions. Like I never had to go through the scariness of going up there and being with like a bunch of other people auditioning for the instrument and having to fret the outcome. Like it was a whirlwind from day one for me because I joined so late. Um, and the fact that we had taken the high drum trophy at the end kind of really sealed that whole experience. And I loved that show. I can't, to be honest, I just really loved it. I loved Ralph's writing. I loved the funk that he put, on to Lloyd Webber stuff, which is not very funky music, and he made it cool. And 90, because I had really made a personal choice to have a good year, be a better person. We had a great group of guys throughout the entire percussion section. The whole battery was really great, folks. And the fact that we were good, that the tenor line was good that year, and the whole drum line was good. But I think we secretly, I think our thing was, we were like, why do the snare drummers get all the attention? What's up with that? It's just like, let's see what we can do about that, shall we? So,
Well, you guys definitely made a splash in taking some eyes away from the snares for sure.
right. So it was a fun year, not strong competitively, but I loved the music because, again, Ralph's music, Scott's influence on Ralph's music, so that stuff that might have been yanked a little sooner stayed in a little longer. Like we probably had almost as many or just as many grace notes as the snares in the tenor book. I remember me and Matt after finals, we counted them, and I don't remember what the number was, but it was like, that's respectable. Yeah, those are my two favorites. And a lot of that's just kind of by virtue of the change up in staff and just some of the adjusting that we were forced into after that just made it hard to have as fun of a time for me anyways.
Yeah. So, I mentioned earlier that I marched actually 2 years with Jeff Queen before you marched with him in '92. But I reached out to him to see if he had any questions. And he gave me a pretty good one that hopefully you remember. He said, ask Murray about the cat we adopted in San Jose after the summer of '92.
Oh my gosh.
Do you remember that?
I don't. Oh man, I do not remember that.
He also said that
I remember the snake we adopted.
maybe that's what he's referring to, because he put cat in quotation marks. So maybe
I'll bet he's talking about the snake.
What's the deal with the snake?
So there's a horn player in the Corps who shall not be named, who had a snake, Monty. It was a python, obviously. And it was maybe a 4-footer, something like that. And he loved this thing, and he'd bring it to parties, and he was the guy with the snake around his neck and, showing it to girls and, conversation piece and all that. And he wanted to go back east, which I believe is where he was from, for a short time. And he asked, hey, can you take care of Monty for me? And we were like, yeah, why not? It was like, you just feed him once a week. You get a mouse, to a pet store, you feed him once a week, put the mouse in there, close the top, and, let nature run its course. Well, we made the, uneducated decision. We said, let's grow this guy. Let's grow this snake. So we fed him more than the prescribed amount and larger animals and stuff. And, we used to have like events around the feeding, right? We'd have people over and
Wow.
crack a couple of beers, and you can imagine, right? A bunch of drum corps ne'er-do-wells, just watching a snake eat a poor defenseless creature.
Mm-hmm.
So that was going well for a while, but then this person whose snake this was didn't return. And we couldn't really find out, we couldn't get a hold of him, and we didn't know what was happening. So now it's like, a month or two down the road, and we're like, this is getting old now, right? Like, he was getting irritated, I think, because he was getting a little big for his cage, his
Right.
terrarium, is that what you call it?
Mm-hmm.
And he had snapped at me a couple of times, and they just have gripper teeth, so they can't really hurt you. But like he definitely was less and less of a happy camper. And there were times, this is total literally, we'd come home and you'd look over and the top of the terrarium is,
Of course. Yep.
askew.
Oh, man.
And this is an apartment, and you're like,
Where's the snake?
here's snaky. Here's where find the snake in the apartment. And at least one time, like, he used to get up on the TV, which was warm. It was a tube set, and he'd get up on the back grate and lay there and urinate into the TV. So that now everybody who listens to this will
Wow,
have heard that.
I was today years old when I found out that snakes urinate. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, we didn't either until we had not found the snake, and we were like watching probably TV or playing Street Fighter. Those were the two, things that we did besides playing drums. And all of a sudden you just hear this, it's like, what is that? It's coming from the TV, and like look back there, and sure enough, there's Monty.
Yeah.
Cool. Eventually, just to put everybody at ease, we did find a better home for him. One of my best friends, Eric, was going to school and knew somebody that was like kind of a serious reptile collector and had the space for Monty. So we did get him to a decent home after that. But I'm guessing that's what he's talking about.
Yeah. I'm 99% sure that was it.
Yeah.
Hey, I have one last question from Kevin, and he wanted me to ask you, when you're in the moment competing, it's often difficult to look at your competition with an open mind and eyes. And it says, because everybody loves their own cooking. While you were still marching, were there any other lines that you particularly enjoyed or appreciated?
For sure, in the later years, the Blue Devils. I had always had kind of a secret crush on the Blue Devils. Probably since '86, when I saw them for the first time and just saw a bunch of snare drummers. I don't remember how many were in the line, just play piano, 3 strokes clean. And they were just, they were the cool kids from up the Bay. Right. And there was, right when I came in, it was kind of at the tail end of, sort of this animosity between the two groups, where it was like, maybe you don't talk to those guys over there, we're enemies. Sure. Or whatever.
Red and blue. Yeah.
Red and blue. Right. And so that was kind of, I think, tapering off, which was great, by that time. And a lot of times, Vanguard wasn't a real threat to the Blue Devils. It was very rare where we would take them. Right. But in '90, I remember paying more attention to them while I was marching. And, I just thought Tommy was a great show for that corps. And I think I had met Vern at that point, and maybe a couple of the other guys. Oh, this reminds me, one of my favorite stories about the Devils. This is a tangent, I'm sorry, but
we love this. Yeah,
you guys will get a kick out of this. '88, Ogden, Utah. One of the first shows out on the open road for us, and saw some Blue Devils, and we're there warming up earlier because it's probably we're on second to last, Blue Devils are on last, that type of thing. And we're sitting there warming up, and here comes the Blue Devils drum bus up to the parking lot, and they're driving right by us. So they're maybe like 30 feet from the front of our warm-up arc, and a bunch of the windows are down, and there's dudes just like, hey, just like gesticulating all over the place. And you can kind of see through the tinted glass that there's just chaos in there, right? There's just people dancing and doing all sorts of whatnot. And then it stops, and the door opens up, and there's Josh, tenor section leader. He's driving the bus. and I'm pretty sure he didn't have shoes on.
Oh man.
Yeah.
And he's just like, and
Sounds
it
about
was
right.
like, this is how we're rolling in.
Yeah.
That was like, even though I was, just, 17 and just really didn't know much about much, I just thought that was like super hilarious and cool. So they always kind of they sat in that area for me, like, just like cool guys, different style for sure, but like, just they have fun and they know how to have fun. And so I always had respect for them. But the bigger answer, I think, to the question is I had blinders on a lot of those years. I mean, I was an only child, pretty, blinders on for a lot of my life. I actually it's taken me a lot of years to kind of, look outside of myself for lots of different reasons. And drum corps for sure. I was just so wrapped up in what was going on with us. Now that I'm saying this out loud, it probably would have been the best thing for me in like 92, for instance, where I was sitting there stewing on, how we weren't happy with the way things were going and yada, yada. Like if I'd just gotten out a little bit or checked out some other groups and gotten a perspective, it would have really helped. But I didn't really do that in earnest until later as a teacher and stuff.
Since we're kind of going off on tangents a little bit, let me back up to 89. Early season, you guys, this California tour, you guys got beaten drums by Velvet Knights once or twice, maybe. Do you remember that at all?
You said in 89?
Yeah.
Was 89 the year? Oh, VK was like super hot in 89, right?
Yeah, Matt Altmeyer was in there.
Yeah,
that was his year. Yeah,
doing the triplets, the drum set triplets up front. Oh yeah, yeah. I don't. Now that you're saying it, I do have a very vague, that rings a faint bell. But I remember thinking that they were really cool. I had seen them several times, and I remember thinking I was a little jelly. It was like, so I want to play that stuff. Which, again, as I'm uttering that out loud, it seems in contrast to what I was saying earlier about just being totally into Ralph's music. But it just looked so much fun, and it was really cool what they were doing. So I remember having a lot of respect. And I actually had known Dave Hinkle by that point. I had met Dave I did a little RCC tour when I was like still in high school. I went to Hawaii with them, and Dave was the instructor there. So I got a dose of some Hinkle back then, which was great. Great guy.
Yeah. No, I was always kind of curious because you're the first person that we've had on marching Blue Devils or Vanguard from 89. And I just remember, there were a few shows of VK, they won drums, and I'd always been curious from the perspective from the other side, from like Vanguard or Blue Devils, who typically win drums, and to get beat by the Velvet Knights. I don't know. Oh, enough for that tangent. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how much I was into winning like drums or tapped into like feeling really competitive about winning. I think a lot of the time when I was in the line, I was just more, it was very like kind of what was happening right here. Like, were we playing well? Was the vibe good or did it suck? Not really looking out into the world very much, with maybe some select few exceptions. I do remember the VK line at 89 and being impressed by them. So that was definitely one of the times where I was like, oh yeah,